I didn't write too many love tunes, and nobody was into the protest type bag just then, And so I wrote it, and producer Jerry Butler decided to put it out.
Well, ever since we were little, we would just argue, and then we just know that you don't take it personal.
What, sir?
We have little family arguments, but we don't hold grudges at all.
Sylvers, the family band that set America ablaze in the 1970s with their flowing Afro hair, synchronized dance moves and rhythms that pulsed straight into the hearts of millions. They didn't just sing, they made America young again, dream again during some of the most turbulent years in modern history. Throughout those years, the image of the Sylvers was everywhere, dominating television screens, gracing the covers of Billboard, Ebony, and Jet from Los Angeles to New York. A family that seemed unstoppable, sharing the same blood, the same breath, lighting up every stage with an energy no one could replicate. But behind those dazzling lights, behind every brilliant smile, lay a silent countdown of tragedy. The children who once basked in the spotlight would one by one fall into addiction, into early graves, into lonely, forgotten lives. And so, people ask from the very first night they stepped onto the stage, had they unknowingly signed a sentence they could never escape. Today's video will take you back to the brightest days of the Sylvers, and then step by step, lift the dark veil that trapped an entire legendary family in an endless nightmare. To truly understand why the Sylvers tragedy still haunts us, we must rewind back to where it all began. In 1948, in the deep south of Louisiana, where the heavy shadow of racial segregation still loomed, Shirley Mae Weibel, a young black woman barely in her 20s, met Leon Sylvers, Sr., a quiet man harboring dreams of music in his heart. In a society where even a wrong glance could cost you a beating, they chose to love to marry and to risk everything to escape the suffocating South. 3 years later, they packed up everything they had and left Louisiana heading toward Los Angeles, a city booming with promises of opportunity in the post-war industrial surge. But the brutal truth hit quickly. Los Angeles, too, was lined with invisible walls. Black families were crammed into slums, barred from restaurants. Theaters and the so-called land of dreams turned out to be little more than a glittering lie. In a rickety house along Crenshaw Boulevard where gunshots cracked through the night and the American dream was little more than hollow gloss, Shirley and Leon made a decision: if the outside world wouldn't give them a chance, they would build their own army. Within 17 years, Shirley gave birth to 11 children, an astonishing number, even by the standards of large black families. At the time, each child was expected to be a piece of the family music dream their parents clung to. Every newborn cry in that cramped house wasn't just life, it was a silent pact. They were born to sing, to perform, to claim the life their parents were denied. By the mid-1960s, as America roared through the civil rights movement and soul music filled the airwaves, Shirley and Leon began putting their plan into motion. They formed a small family group called the Little Angels. The children were subjected to grueling training from the very start. One freezing night in the winter of 1967, in their cramped South Los Angeles home, the Sylvers children were pulled from their beds at 1 a.m., lined up under the cold glare of a single bulb. No water, no coats, just an old piano and the stern gaze of their parents. Each child had to sing every note perfectly. One mistake meant dropping to their knees and starting over Foster. Barely 7 years old, broke into tears. Halfway through, Leon Sr. only said coldly, "Crying won't feed this family. Sing." From those sleepless nights, the dream of music hardened into a merciless command. And then a twist of fate changed the entire destiny of the Sylvers family in 1969. That day, during a small church performance in Watts, an assistant producer for the show You Bet Your Life, hosted by the legendary Groucho Marx, happened to stop by blending into the back pews. He couldn't believe his eyes as he watched a group of black children, their Afro hair wild and proud, harmonizing with an eerie precision. 3 weeks later, the Little Angels were invited to appear on national television. For the first time, a large, humble, and proud black family stood under the bright lights, met with roaring applause from across America. But that innocence didn't last long. That small flicker of success on TV only fueled Leon and Shirley's ambition. By the end of 1971, they officially dropped the sweet name Little Angels, replacing it with the Sylvers. A bold declaration these were no longer just singing children. They were about to become a musical empire. They had no idea that the name would be remembered, not just for their music, but for the deep, twisted tragedies that would follow. The stage of glory had opened wide for the Sylvers, but it was also a one-way ticket to a destruction no one could foresee. By the summer of 1973, as the streets of Los Angeles simmered in heat, a 12-year-old boy from the Sylvers clan shook America Foster. Sylvers, with his soft afro and bright eyes, sang Misdemeanor like a whisper laced with magic. The simple recording, made in an old studio in barely a day, took less than a week to explode across radio stations, nationwide, crowning Foster as America's new music prodigy. That explosion was only the beginning. By early 1975, boogie fever swept across the country like wildfire. Nightclubs, from Chicago to San Francisco, throbbed with its infectious beat and wild dance moves. No one could stay seated when that song hit. In a single breath, the Sylvers seized the #1 spot on the Billboard Hot 100, ushering in a new golden era for soul pop music. In 1976, with Hotline, the Sylvers family seemed to touch immortality. Appearing in sparkling jumpsuits, executing synchronized moves with perfect flair, their proud afros held high. They didn't just perform, they turned every stage into a collective fever dream, making America feel young and alive again during fractured, uncertain times. But the higher they soared, the heavier the weight pressing down became. At that point, Sylvers' music generated between $2 to $3 million annually, a fortune by any standard. Back then, yet in brutal reality, over 85% of that money vanished without a trace, siphoned off by record labels, lawyers, and managers. During every glittering night, every deafening cheer, each Sylvers member was barely holding on to less than $50,000 a year. Far too little for everything they had sacrificed: their childhoods, their strength, their most beautiful years of youth. One night at the end of 1976, as the group prepared for the biggest tour of their career, Leon Sylvers III, the eldest brother and musical soul of the group, stumbled upon an overlooked financial statement in the record label's conference room. The cold numbers screamed the truth. For every record sold, the label pocketed 10 times what the group earned. That night, overcome with rage, Leon stormed into the rehearsal room and smashed his beloved bass guitar against the brick wall, leaving a deep, gaping scar, much like the one now carved into his heart. The others sat in stunned silence, watching the shattered pieces on the floor as if witnessing their brightest dreams splinter into irreparable ruins. After that night, every dance step, every song from the Sylvers lost its burning fire, and what was meant to come came. In the sweltering summer of 1977, the Sylvers gathered in a cramped Van Nuys studio to make a bold decision to self-produce their next album. "We don't need anyone else," Leon Jr. declared, eyes blazing with the hunger for freedom. But in the months that followed, when the album finally dropped, the poor sales figures hit them like a cold slap to the face. Their once ubiquitous music began disappearing from radio waves. Songs that had once set crowds ablaze now echoed faintly in the dusty corners of forgotten charts. By late 1978, amidst growing disarray, they found themselves slouched on cheap plastic chairs in a lawyer's office, signing a new contract with Al Ross, a man who promised to save their future. But no one in the family had read the fine print. Soon enough, the brutal reality sank in. 50% of all revenue from tours to royalties now belonged to Ross. It was a perfect trap. And so the family dinners that once overflowed with laughter now fell into an eerie silence. The siblings started arguing over money, over control of the group, over concerts that no longer drew full crowds. During one rehearsal that December, Foster slammed his microphone to the ground and shouted at Leon Jr., "I'm not your damn cash machine." The shattering mic echoed through the empty studio like an ominous omen of what was to come. And fate took its first step on August 12, 1979, as Los Angeles sagged under the heavy weight of summer heat. Olympia Sylvers, the 19-year-old daughter of the family, left the rehearsal room after another exhausting practice. Her eyes drooped from endless sleepless nights, desperately trying to cling on to the fading shows. As Olympia dragged her feet along the narrow sidewalk, a silver Chevrolet Impala slowly crawled out from the shadows. Inside, a few old friends from the underground music scene waved and laughed. "Come on, girl, we got something real nice for you," one of them called out through the lowered window. Olympia hesitated, but in those precarious days when the family's career was spiraling out of control, a moment of weakness was all it took for tragedy to creep in. She opened the car door, stepped in, and the door slammed shut. The car sped off, weaving through the deserted streets. Olympia began to feel uneasy, but when she turned to look for an escape, it was already too late. A rough hand shoved her back against the seat. Olympia screamed, but her voice was swallowed by the roaring engine. As she struggled through the pain, a filthy needle plunged deep into her vein, injecting a cold, burning stimulant straight into her bloodstream. The world around Olympia shattered into blurry fragments, smeared yellow lights, the stench of gasoline, hoarse laughter, and the distorted faces flickering in the rearview mirror. But amid the drugged terror, her survival instinct roared to life. When the Impala stopped at a red light at the intersection of 43rd Street, Olympia, in a desperate effort, bit hard into the seatbelt strapped across her. With a violent yank, the belt snapped, and in a fleeting moment, between the red light and blaring car horns, Olympia hurled herself out of the car, rolling across the rough pavement. A horrified scream rang out behind her. A man from the car lunged forward, but Olympia managed to stagger to her feet, stumbling like a sleepwalker. By some miracle, she slipped into a narrow alleyway, vanishing before her kidnappers could catch her. Hours later, Olympia was found collapsed beneath the I-110 overpass unconscious, her body bruised and battered, her mind torn apart by the horror she had endured. The Sylvers family remained silent. No complaints, no press conference. They buried the incident like a shameful wound, terrified that any slip would become fodder for a media circus eager for dark tales about black celebrities. But for Olympia, the wound could never be hidden. Starting in 1980, Olympia Sylvers spiraled into darkness. She fell deep into heroin addiction, abandoning every attempt at rehab after just a few tortured weeks in nameless recovery centers. Many nights, she was seen wandering under the I-110 overpass, lost in a haze of chemical oblivion. The girl who once laughed so brightly on national television was now a hollow shell destroyed by that night of terror. If Olympia's fateful night marked the beginning of an unnamed tragedy, Edmund Sylvers chose to hurl himself headlong into the abyss. On September 17, 1980, Edmund Sylvers, the once brightest star of the Sylvers family, stood silently on a tiny stage at the Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel. It was supposed to be his night of triumph, the launch party for his debut solo album, Have You Heard, his first step out from under the family's enormous shadow. Dressed in a sleek black velvet suit, his afro neatly groomed, Edmund's deep dark eyes gleamed with hope. But that hope shattered the moment he looked out at the hall, rows of empty chairs, a smattering of indifferent faces. No roaring crowds, no flashing cameras, only the soft clink of abandoned glasses and pitying glances from across the room. Have You Heard flopped catastrophically on arrival. After the ceremony, while hotel staff cleared away the leftover drinks, Edmund drifted into the lobby. The night air of Los Angeles was murky, the streetlights casting a pale, sickly glow on the old hotel's facade. In a moment unseen by anyone, he slipped off the heavy gold ring engraved with Sylvers, the same ring his father had given him when the group first signed with the record label, and hurled it into the fountain at the center of the courtyard. From that night on, Edmund spiraled uncontrollably. He plunged into fleeting affairs, endless parties trying to fill the growing void within. Year after year, illegitimate children appeared, 11, then 13, then 15, with different women whose names he could no longer remember. No one talked about Have You Heard anymore. No one called him the hero of Boogie Fever. The last scraps of money from the golden years dried up. Edmund struggled under mounting debts, forced to leave Los Angeles, drifting through small towns, eventually ending up in Richmond, Virginia, a forgotten name in a forgotten city. In October 2004, Edmund Sylvers was found dead in a crumbling apartment in South Richmond. He died quietly of lung cancer complications at 47 years old, alone, with no family by his side, no music playing him off. No grand funeral, No newspaper headlines, only a scattering of children carrying Sylvers' blood across America, growing up in unknown homes, never knowing that their father had once been part of the brightest musical legend of the 1970s. If the Sylvers family's brilliance once blazed across the sky like a meteor, then Edmund was the shattered fragment that fell burning bright, only to crash down mercilessly. Yet he wasn't the last Sylvers member to fall prey to the curse. On June 12, 2007, police in Inglewood, California, received an anonymous call about a strange assault at a rundown apartment complex off La Brea Avenue. When they broke into Unit 306, a bizarre scene unfolded before them. The room was thick with acrid smoke, every surface sticky with the stench. In the middle of the fog, Foster Sylvers sat slumped on the floor, his eyes bloodshot, his hair a tangled mess, his sweat-soaked t-shirt clinging to his skeletal frame. He giggled uncontrollably, mumbling fragments of their old hit, Boogie Fever, like the music of a long-lost era, still haunted his drug-fried mind. In the corner, a terrified little girl about 10 years old huddled into a ball, her face bruised. It was later confirmed that she was the daughter of an acquaintance left temporarily in Foster's care. No one knew exactly when Foster began his descent. After the dazzling lights of the 70s, after his solo hit Misdemeanor, Foster faded from Hollywood's radar only to resurface sporadically in tabloids, arrested for drug possession, inappropriate behavior, drowning in debt. The 2007 arrest was the final blow. Foster was convicted, his reputation in ruins, stripped of whatever scraps of fame he had left. After serving his sentence, he drifted between homeless shelters in South Los Angeles, his only belongings a torn backpack carrying fragments from a lost golden era, an old poster, a scratched vinyl record, a yellowed lyric sheet of high school dance. Once a musical prodigy, Foster Sylvers became the most tragic warning of what fame, drugs, and oblivion could destroy. Falling alongside Foster in the spiral of addiction was Ricky Sylvers. By April 1993, Compton was no longer a land of dreams. It had become a battlefield, each street corner a lurking death trap of guns and discarded needles. Amidst this world, Ricky Sylvers, who once helped light up the hearts of millions, was now just another forgotten soul wandering through the ruins. On the night of April 5th, after a brutal drug crash, Ricky collapsed on the cracked sidewalk near Rosecrans Avenue. The first spring rain hammered down, trying to wash everything away. At 3 a.m., they found him curled up, frozen, stiff, his jacket torn and caked with mud. Initially, medics assumed he was just another junkie who overdosed until a flashlight beam caught something in Ricky's left hand. Clutched in his frozen fingers was a crumpled photograph, an old poster of the Sylvers from 1975, with Ricky smiling brightly at the front, his Afro defiant against the world. A young nurse, only 24 at the time, later recalled, "I was about to move on, but that picture, something made me stop. A gut feeling told me not to let him die alone." Ricky was resuscitated en route to the hospital. His heart stopped once, but miraculously revived. He woke up 3 days later in a stark white bed at Compton Memorial Hospital, alone, save for the battered photograph resting silently on his bedside table. After that night, Ricky never returned to the stage. He lived quietly at a rehab center for ex-inmates, mopping floors, fixing leaky pipes in exchange for a bunk bed and modest meals. But every night before lights out, he would place the Sylvers group photo on his nightstand and whisper almost like a prayer, "We used to be the light." Yet the most haunting and mysterious tragedy of the famous family unfolded on the night of September 13, 1985, in South Los Angeles. Underneath a public payphone, fate waited silently for Christopher Sylvers. Just 18 years old Christopher, once the family's brightest hope, was now drowning in despair. The Sylvers' glory days had become a distant memory. The group had quietly dissolved, members scattered, struggling in obscurity. The fortunes from their peak years had been drained, shows had vanished, and their fame had withered into cold, cruel indifference. Christopher bore the weight of it all alone, lost in exhaustion and loneliness. After battling a high fever for 2 days without medication, without anyone by his side, he stumbled through the misty rain of South Los Angeles, starving, delirious, clinging to one simple wish to find a payphone and call his sister Charmaine for help. But even that small mercy was denied him. Clutching a 25-cent coin in his trembling hand, Christopher staggered toward a flickering booth. The light above buzzed weakly, like his faltering heartbeat. He lifted the receiver, but before he could even insert the coin, his legs buckled. He was found the next morning. His body cold collapsed inside the cramped booth. The silver coin still clenched tightly in his hand, frozen like all the dreams that would never come true. Christopher Sylvers passed away forgotten by a world that once cheered his family's name. His funeral was a modest affair funded by a government program for the indigent, a plain wooden casket. No grand tombstone, just a small inscription etched under the scorching South LA sun. Christopher Sylvers, 1967-1985. As the past faded into dust, only Leon Sylvers III had the strength to rise from the ashes. With brilliant hands and a sharp musical mind, Leon reinvented himself as a top producer, crafting shimmering sounds for Shalimar Dynasty and countless R&B stars throughout the 80s. He quietly built his own empire, radiant without needing the spotlight. As for the others, Charmaine, James, Pat, Angelo, they drifted away like fallen stars. They became preschool teachers, office workers, small store clerks in suburban Los Angeles, humble jobs no one would believe once belonged to people who made America stop and listen in the 70s. Who would have guessed that behind each silent tragedy, behind Olympia, wandering under the overpass Edmund, throwing his ring into a fountain, Foster mumbling through a haze of crack smoke, Ricky collapsing on a rain-soaked sidewalk, Christopher gasping his last breath in a cold phone booth, lurked the shadow of two figures, Leon Sylvers Sr. and Shirley Mae Weibel. Leon Sr., once an amateur musician whose own dreams failed, poured all his ambitions into his children. In their cramped South Central home, he turned every corner into a training ground. While other kids played ball in the sun, the Sylvers children sang, danced, and learned how to smile for crowds while silently wiping away tears from missed notes and bruised knees. Shirley, believing it was for the best, gave her love and weary strength. But as she watched her children lose their childhoods one by one, she fell into a pained, quiet resignation, retreating to the kitchen while the dream she once believed in was consumed by the merciless flames of fame. In 1972, in a moment of desperation and ambition, Leon Sylvers Sr. made a dark deal with a shady entertainment broker, a man whispered about in industry circles as the Soul Hunter. Not for devils or demons, but for the way he devoured young talents, futures for filthy profits. No contracts, no clear terms, just a handshake under the dim yellow light of a Sunset Boulevard back office. Instant fame for the Sylvers in exchange for control over their schedules, finances, and lives. Leon Sr. believed he could manage it, that strict discipline and love would shield his children, but he underestimated the cruelty of the world he had entered. Each day, the Sylvers kids were forced to sing, dance, smile before cameras before they even knew how to care for a scraped knee. Their childhoods drained away, their youth manipulated, and when the spotlight dimmed, no one cared what they had sacrificed. No curse existed, only whispered deals, dirty hands, and fragile souls crushed by an unstoppable entertainment machine. Leon Sr. spent his final years in silent regret. He died in 2005 at age 75, carrying secrets he never dared to confess. Shirley Mae followed quietly in 2014 at 82, leaving the world with the same hush that saw their dreams fade into oblivion. Now, when a Sylvers song echoes somewhere through the forgotten alleys of a city that moved on, who remembers that behind those sweet smiles once lurked a sentence engraved by ambition, pressure, and blind love? The heartbreaking truth is, after trading a happy family life for fleeting fame, what remains? By 2024, if you search the Sylvers in financial records, all you find is a cold figure less than $200,000 in total assets. No mansions, no luxury cars, no memorial museum, no reunion, not even a fragile attempt to hold hands one more time. Once legends, now only a faded footnote in history. Each member fell under the crushing weight of their own lost brilliance. Some sank into poverty, some aged quietly in crumbling apartments. Some wandered the dark intersections of Los Angeles like ghosts, where only echoes of the 70s hits remained. Who would have thought that the children who once made America dance, laugh, and dream now clutched only broken memories in their final frozen days? Yet, even as their lives faded into tears, no one can deny the Sylvers left behind a vibrant treasure trove of music for an entire generation. Hits like Boogie Fever, Hotline, and High School Dance not only ignited dance floors across America, but became stitched into the cultural fabric of a generation. The bouncing afros, the explosive disco, beats the united spirit of a musical family, all burned deep into the hearts of those who grew up with their songs. Whenever those familiar melodies ring out, you can still glimpse those children who once dared to dream and to burn so brightly on stage. If from the very beginning that dream was laced with blood and tears, would they still have dared to step onto the stage? And what do you think truly pushed such a talented family into such devastating ruin? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story touched you, like it did us, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and join us as we uncover more forgotten secrets behind the fading lights of fame.